I'm so glad you're all here. Here, I'd like to introduce our speaker. Professor Alex Taub has been teaching at WVC for 14 years, and he considers teaching a privilege and calling, not just a job. Because of this, he's motivated and committed to helping his students, to help them succeed, to help them grow. He sees potential in all students, from those who seem to be excelling to those who seem to be struggling, because he sees the struggle as something that's not permanent, especially with the supports. This comes from his extensive experience ranging from family services to schools to youth corrections. He's taken classes internationally, online, to get an international perspective on working with troubled youth and on education and anthropological issues. And his wide experience has helped him see a wide variety of perspectives and problems, but it's also built in him a lot of concern, a lot of compassion, and the ability to envision solutions, and it's promoted his strong commitment to prevention and support. So I would like you to welcome Professor Alex Taub and listen to him as he talks about his expertise in working with high-risk, high-reward youth.
Put the sound system. You got to put the sound system on or someone's going to come and yell at you, so you got to do that because they're recording this for posterity. Either that or blackmail, they haven't told me. I'd like to take a quick moment before I get started to thank Randy for organizing this. I'd also like to thank all of you for taking time. I know this is the busiest part of the academic year. We are 2 weeks from graduation, and so a lot of you are busy with projects, etc. Some of you are here because your professors offered you extra credit. I paid them well. And I also want to thank Carly Schiffner for endorsing and helping to create this forum. One thing I want to make perfectly clear from the beginning: I am not an expert youth worker. I've been working in the field for 29 years. That doesn't make you an expert. I've seen people do youth work beautifully all the time without a college degree, without specialized training. And I want to today bring our attention to the fact that we cannot view these kids as throwaway. There is no such thing as a throwaway kid. I had not planned to go into working with high-risk youth. I mean, first of all, what right do I, a kid from Seattle, middle class, Jewish background, family educated, have to talk about kids who are at risk and high risk? I started at Central Washington University with the goal of getting a degree in elementary education. And one of the things that made me go to Central was it gave me the opportunity to do practicums or in-classroom experiences from the get-go. I'd already been teaching for 3 years. I had been a Sunday school teacher. I wanted to get into the classroom because I knew already that that's where the most learning is done, is in teaching. But one thing that Central allowed me to do was take some of my prerequisites for teaching early, and one of them was cultural anthropology. And I so fell in love with the topic and the teacher that I kept taking more and more anthropology classes, which led to a switch in the summer of 1988. I was getting taught, teacher education was teaching me about the bureaucracy of teaching. Any of you who've worked with me know my attitudes towards bureaucracy and my attitudes towards getting paperwork done for no particular reason whatsoever. I'm not quite as bad as Paul Stoll, our former sociology professor, who turned them into paper airplanes. But in the summer of 1988, Youth Services of Kittitas County got a grant to employ some high-risk youth, 10 to 12 kids, who were known juveniles in trouble, had records of criminal behavior, and so the director of Youth Services of Kittitas County, the late Stan Bassett, may he rest in peace, got a grant because he was able to explain to somebody in the state that it was cheaper to pay these kids minimum wage and have them supervised by college students than it was to put them in juvie. And so what they did is they had an archaeology dig at the youth center, which happens to be the exact location where Ellensburg was originally founded. And I was asked to come in because they needed another pit supervisor. And I found working with these kids was so much more educational and so much more worthwhile than recording artifacts in a logbook for the 14th time. And these kids taught me some very important lessons to the point that when the dig was done, I didn't leave. I stayed as a volunteer. And I learned a very important lesson. Kids look at your actions, not your lectures. These kids are used to feeling lied to. They don't expect adults to keep their promises. They don't even expect adults to listen to them. This was a lesson I learned because I didn't know that. I just was being myself. I saw a kid who lived 7 miles out of town. We'd had a long, hot day. He was tired. So I threw his bike in the car and threw him in the front seat and drove him home. So what? The director called me into his office 2 days later. I was expecting to get chewed out, and he said, no. They're not used to this. Good job. After I left Central Washington University, I went to Western Washington University. Now that's a weird transition if you think about it. Where I was majoring in anthropology, and one of the things I did was I got an internship at the Whatcom County Juvenile Court, where I studied the types of kids who were coming into the juvenile court. No, that's not what I want. I gotta love these things. Okay, thank you. Thank you. There. Put the toy down. That solves the problem. Okay. I worked with the kids. I saw what was going on in the juvenile system, and I was not impressed. We had kids coming in over and over again. The kids thought the juvenile court system was a joke, and what's more, they treated it like a joke. Furthermore, to be perfectly honest, the staff thought it was a joke, but for different reasons. And I wanted to get into why these kids were going to juvie. In 1991, I applied to do my graduate research field work at Echo Glen Juvenile Detention Center. What I wanted to study was the use of fictive kinship terms, kids in gangs calling each other bro or sister, and what did they expect in behavior based on the people who they were addressing using these family terms. How strong was this bond? How reliable was it? Was it something they could call on, as they said, 24/7, or were there weaknesses to it? And I had applied to Echo Glen, and I had explained the research, and they said, well, that's fine. You can come here, you can do your research, but your research notes have to stay here in a locked drawer under our control, and if you see any gang activity at all, you need to notify the staff immediately. Which meant that I would have to notify them immediately if I saw anything that I was there to study. This being a violation of the American Anthropology Association ethics guidelines and my own, I had to explain to my committee why we needed to shift focus. So instead, in 1992, I finished my master's by focusing on Copedrazgo, which is a godparent system used in Mexico and in Latin America, which allows communities to pull together those who have financial resources to those who don't, and form what's called a patron-client relationship, as is outlined by George M. Foster. But one thing the master's degree taught me is it's not the degree, it's the attitude. And I've asked a few people to be here today for a reason. And the reason is because we've got some people on this campus who are excellent youth workers, who I've seen mentoring individuals when they thought nobody was watching. Because we have high-risk youth on this campus. Betsy, a young man who you worked with 2 years ago when he was on probation for a drug offense, is starting today at WorkSource, at the Job Corps rather, down in Portland. Rigo, I don't know how many kids you've helped. Try to convince them to not give up, to keep going. I see the entire pool from the instruction office, who I have seen on the phone with students who are ready to quit, trying to convince them, go talk to the professor one time. It's not going to cost you anything. Just go talk to them. See what you can do. Anne, stand up. Oh, you are standing up. I'm sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Anne. She is our lead custodian, and for some reason she thinks that job title includes mentoring every student, faculty member, and half the administration on campus, including kicking us in the rear end every once in a while when our ego gets in the way. But the fact is, it's not the degree. It's not even the training. It's the attitude, the concern, that makes a good youth worker. Because what these kids are looking for is honest attention. After graduate school, I worked a number of case management temporary jobs, as we usually do for those of us in the social work field. I worked for an aging care facility. I worked for a number of youth programs. And then in 1994 and 95, I got my big break to work at Partners in Care, which had control over a wing of juvenile detention in Seattle for King County. They ran a program for 12 young men who were supposed to be honors kids out of juvie, and they were sent to this house that they had 2 staff supervisors. And it was during that time that I was actually able to do the research that I wanted to, and discovered exactly what I wasn't prepared for. That the youth use the terms bro, and they do have the expectations. If there's a fight and I can get prestige for standing up to you, I'll be there. If we're going to go beat somebody up, I'll be there. If we're going to do something about drugs, I will be there. You have a court date where I can get you out of it, you're on your own. Have a nice day. See you later. Bye. My probation officer's looking for me. And so I was able to see how the fictive kinship system of gangs worked and didn't work. But I also got to see a lot of other things. I got to hear the same stories over and over and over again. So after 2 years of that, and getting married, and a wife who decided she did not want her husband working in a juvenile detention facility, I started to move on. But I want to talk about some of the lessons I learned there. One thing you got to learn when you're working with juveniles in juvenile detention, we don't save kids. We give kids opportunities to save themselves. Just like here at Wenatchee Valley College, we can't force students to learn. We give students opportunities to learn. We try to create ways of teaching that are interesting. But it's up to them to decide that's what they want to do. If I take the credit for saving a kid, I've also got to take the blame for all the kids I don't save. And I got news for you, that's a long list. Each kid has various needs and responses to diverse possible mentors. There is no one way to be a youth worker. Different kids have different needs at different times. A kid may click with me today and tomorrow think I am Satan. A kid may work with me really well, but not work well with my female coworkers. Or they may work well with my female coworkers and think all men are evil. There are some people who need mentors who are LGBT familiar. And this is normal. The kids need what the kids need. Don't take it personally. Thus, more and different programs give kids opportunities. Not just opportunities for us to reach them, but opportunities for them to have some say in what these programs do. It's hard for a kid out of 100 to get a voice. That, and you've got to live as an example of what you want for them. Admit to your mistakes. God, did I make a lot of them? And remember to be able to laugh at yourself. And as I said before we got started, yeah, this white man can't jump, can't rebound, and really, I cannot shoot a basketball. Okay, I lost basketball games to kids who were using one hand to hold up their pants and one hand to dribble. But I can listen. Be willing to make a fool of yourself. After leaving there, I had a number of jobs that gave me opportunities to keep working with high-risk youth. I worked for Child Protective Services in Yakima. Yes, I'm in recovery. I worked as a court caseload manager for the Lower District Court. When my wife got a job up here, I became a substitute teacher and went back into the classroom again. And then since 2003, with a short break in there, I've been teaching at Wenatchee Valley College. And Wenatchee Valley College, we have high-risk youth who go here. These jobs taught me something actually that I'd already read but didn't understand. Before you can help these kids, you need to know who you are and what your personality is. Because if you're lying about who you are to yourself, these kids will see right through you. The Tao Te Ching teaches, when a master governs, the people are hardly aware that he exists. The next best is the leader who is loved, next the one who is feared, the worst is the one who is despised. If you don't trust the people, you make them untrustworthy. Working with high-risk youth, they already don't trust you. Give them some freedom in a safe way to learn trust. Give them a chance to earn your trust. Leave a quarter on your desk and walk away. Or a dollar bill. Give them a chance to show that they're going to do what they say. The master doesn't talk, he acts. When his work is done, the people say, amazing, we did it all ourselves. Good youth programming, the kids are running the show. At least they think they are. They think they're the ones picking programming, etc. So what do we mean by at-risk and high-risk in youth? At-risk youth is any youth with a number of risk factors, and it depends on which system you're using, how many risk factors, for future displays of social or legally unacceptable behaviors. I hate this term because risk factors. Are you breathing? That's a risk factor. Are you not breathing? That's also a risk factor. If you are an adolescent girl, you are much more likely to become pregnant than an adolescent male. And if you're an adolescent male, you are more likely to father a child out of wedlock than an adolescent girl. If you are a minority in any way, shape, or form, you are going to be targeted. And if you're someone who just looks out of place, you're going to be a target. Okay, white boy, running track, Garfield High School in Seattle. Running through the CD. Yeah, there's a good game plan. High-risk youth are any youth with a pattern of displaying socially or legally unacceptable behaviors. This we can quantify. This we can measure, because we're dealing with involvement in the juvenile court, or we're dealing with involvement in other social agencies such as Child Protective Services, early pregnancies, etc. And the definition of youth is rather difficult because the time period of middle childhood into adulthood, exact ages are subject to debate and context. We have in our country 12-year-olds who are tried as adults for juvenile crimes. And if you come from an upper middle class background and you're 25, you can still be on mommy and daddy's health insurance. So what do we mean by youth is also up in the air. One thing that I have learned from working with high-risk youth is that they come with anger. They have been lied to, they've been manipulated, And anger is a form of energy. And quite honestly, I'm a teacher. I'm a target of anger. I'm an authority figure in the classroom. So I need to divert it. Would you be so kind as to read what's up here? Since you've seen this text before, I'm quite sure, on at least a few occasions.
Your instructor is not perfect. If you believe the instructor is making a mistake, you should bring in credible documentation and make a professional effort to let him know your views. He tends to give extra credit to those students who teach him new lessons in an appropriate manner.
Have you ever seen me do that in class?
Yes.
The students laugh at it. They think, oh, this is a fun thing. But it's a way that I can take the students' anger and divert it. I was hoping Dave, one of our custodial and maintenance staff, would be here today, but he had something more important, like the marriage of his daughter. I, and Jim Pasta worked with a student that was here 8 years ago. She was a recovering drug addict. She had a long history. She is now a parent again, happily married, has a bachelor's degree in sociology from Eastern Washington University, and if for the first time in her life is happy with who she is. She read this in my syllabus and she did exactly what I wanted her to do. She went to the library every day because she was going to find some place I was wrong. She was going to prove me wrong because she wanted to make sure that I knew I was a hypocrite and I was lying. And she came in 3 weeks into the quarter up to me after class, and she slammed the article down on my desk and said, "Here, this proves you're wrong." I looked at the article she was presenting me with, and it was the exact one I had been citing the day before. And I said, "Yeah, the paragraph here that you're referring to does argue with me. However, if you read 2 paragraphs further down, it shows that the author reversed their own opinion. By the way, you get 4 points of extra credit. She said, why? I said, well, you did the research and you came in. She said, what? I said, look, you went, you did the research, you came in. She said, but I didn't prove you wrong. No, but you did the research. And did you have fun going to the library to prove me wrong? Yeah. Like, okay, because if you're angry, you're easily manipulated. Would you like to learn how I manipulated you so that you don't do it again? Because that's what we do. Why should we care? Beyond ethics. I can lecture on ethics until I'm blue in the face. We should fund education. We should fund social services. How far did that get us in Olympia? Let's look at this in dollar terms. These kids are our potential students. And some of them are here already. So we have students here who are on juvenile probation, adult probation from juvenile charges. We have students here who are running START, who are high risk, who are already mothers or fathers. We have students here who come with all sorts of issues. These youth are a risk within our community. They're not supervised. What trouble are they getting into? These youth are either going to be a further future tax burden or a taxpayer. This is a tax-funded institution. And we compete for our money with the Department of Juvenile Rehabilitation. Youth without supervised activities is a threat. I have watched as a religious youth group turned into a bullying peck when the adult left the room. I have also read of situations in Los Angeles where street gangs, with intervention from priests, interventions from respected members of the community, went from being a threat to the neighborhood to being a neighborhood resource. Juvenile corrections in Washington State, the Department of Juvenile Rehabilitation requested, as a bare minimum for the biennium of 2015 through 2017, $294 million. Then throw in federal grants, and we're talking about real over $300 million. That is real money. That is money that is going into the juvenile system. That does not include preventive measures. And in the United States, we're not good at preventive measures. We have limited after-school programs, which are already underfunded. The current budget proposal is to outline, zero out, after-school programs at the federal level. Museums and nonprofits are also underfunded. And really, with their programs, you need to have parents pay or you need to have grant support. Our local museum used to be part of the city. It's now an independent agency. The YMCA, YWCAs have limited reach and limited funding. Community sports. People always tell me, well, these kids could get involved in community sports. Excuse me, parental funding? Asking a parent who's working 2.5 jobs to shell out $125 for a kid who might be interested, good luck with that. We do have some parks and recreations departments, but again, these are underfunded and are only available in the summer. Oh, we also have diversion. Diversion is a program in juvenile court system where a first or second time offender whose story doesn't make the newspaper and whose parents are involved and go to the courthouse can get their child moved into an alternative program. So rather than being seen by a judge, they're seen by a community panel. And if they do X, Y, and Z, it'll be as if it never happened. But you need parental involvement. Come on. Okay, when all else fails, cheat. What do I tell you, students? Always be prepared for technology to fail. It will. Okay. So what does this failure to provide programs do for us? Okay, this is per 100,000 youth in population. So we're not looking at the population of countries one to the next. We're looking at per 100,000 youth. Australia, 24.9. England and Wales, 46.8. They've got a good youth program there. Finland, 3.6. Finland is a unique situation because it's an almost homogeneous society. And they've got other advantages. France, 18.6. It's not a homogeneous society. Italy, 11.3. Japan, 0.1. Netherlands, 51. Scotland, 33. There's a reason for that. USA, 336. We are 6 times more likely to have a kid incarcerated than any other country in the world. This statistic comes from the Annie Casey study. We need to remember that these kids are not numbers. These are youth, these are students, whether they're clients, whatever you call them, are individuals. When we treat them like individuals, they respond. When we treat them like numbers, they leave. This is something we're good at WVC. This is something which the people who I called out earlier understand. Rigo doesn't call up student 905144 ... He calls up a student who he knows and says, how's it going? Why don't you come in? We haven't talked in a while. No, you don't have another just-in-time alert. I just want to sit down with you. See how things are going. Listen to their needs and desires. Help them find their individual voices and help them find a place within the organization. We've got the student association. We've got all of the clubs on campus. We have different programs that kids can get involved in. If they're not fascinated by their classes, if they're not driven by just the learning, let's find something for them. Because 336 is way too high. Let's put this in dollar terms. As of 2008, on average, it costs $241 per night to put a kid in juvie. For 9 months, it's $66,000. For a year, $88,000 per kid. There are some juvenile programs which can cost up to $250,000 per kid. And we have to acknowledge that these programs aren't what we want them to be. Because while it's good politically to say, I'm tough on crime, and it's good politically to say, we're going to crack down on youth crime and hooliganism, that doesn't give these kids educational opportunities. The program I was working in, these kids had a different teacher every 2 weeks. If they go to Echo Glen or any of the other state institutions, the first month that they're there, they're going to be doing assessments to find out where they're at, what they need. And by the time they start to build a relationship with that teacher, it's time for them to get transferred to a new program. Is it any wonder that the juvenile system in the United States has a recidivism rate? Let's just call that failure. Okay? After 3 years, 80% of all kids who've been in juvenile detention are back in juvie. Remember that $300 million? You remember that flushing sound? Yeah, that's wasted money because we're not focusing on what the kids need. We need to focus also on ourselves because we're part of the problem. I saw this 2 months ago. And I'd like to think that I'm open-minded, I'm well-educated, and I saw this headline, and I saw this photograph, and I thought to myself, God, what are they protesting now? What racism are they complaining about? What system are they complaining about? Why are they asking for more money? And then I read the article and had to confront my own racist stereotypes. Because what these kids were doing was putting together a promotional poster to say, students of African descent, you belong at Cambridge University. This is a place. Young black men don't grow up thinking they'll make it here. They should. The entire rest of the article is talking about how they want to see other kids of African descent in the school system. And we get other images of kids laughing and joking. So I'm just as guilty of holding some of these stereotypes as the other people. We need to be aware of that. This one came out this morning. Why don't we see these images of youth and minorities? Black kids with a hood. These are graduate students graduating. Some of them could be our teachers and colleagues next year. But we don't see those images. We need to recognize that racial, ethnic, socioeconomic minorities and those with learning difficulties are overrepresented and underserved in the juvenile system. Blacks, Hispanics are more likely to end up in juvie than their white counterparts, and for longer sentences. McDonald focused on education. Ward, he did his study on gangs from Guatemala. What he said and what they all said. We didn't feel we were part of the system. We felt we were outside of it. So we figured, what the hell, we'll do our own thing. We need to give kids a way into the system. How do other countries do this? Scotland just banned their juvenile court system, completely disbanded it. They fired the lawyers. In Scotland now, there is a tribunal which hears all juvenile cases, be them social welfare or juvenile crimes. The tribunal is not lawyers, but 3 volunteers with social work education. And the focus is what is on the long-term best interest of the child. You get a kid in with a minor in possession of alcohol, We're not asking how many days in jail should they serve. We're asking, how did they get the alcohol? Why did they want the alcohol? Do they know what this does to them? What's going on at home that they got the alcohol? Let's address the problem. In Canada, Canada has a system of youth programs that is run by the different ethnic communities. So you have First Nation youth programs. I'm aware of an artist by the name of Andy Everson who lives in Comex, Courtney, and in addition to doing his own artwork, he volunteers at a youth center where First Nation kids come in and he teaches them art. And then he teaches them marketing. And then he teaches them how to put it up on the internet and how to sell themselves. Because the communities want to stand up for themselves. Denmark has philosophically the best program. They have what they call pedagogy. Here in the United States, we think of that as learning styles and learning environments. Pedagogy in Scandinavia means what is in the long-term best interests of the child now and proactively. Denmark looks at their youth problems and asks, what does this family need not to solve this crisis, but for the long term? Now, while this sounds great and wonderful, we have to be honest. There was a study that was reported on NPR, National Public Radio, a few weeks ago. Denmark does have a significant problem with its immigrant population who do not feel that those services are being tailored to them in the way that they'd like. England. England used to have a nationalized youth services program, which has now been what they call neoliberalized. Basically, it's the attitude that businesses can do better than government can. And so what they've done is rather than having a national agency, they've sent it down to the lower councils, the regional councils, the county councils, the city councils, and they've given them block grants and said, here, you solve the problem. As we all know from those of us who've watched that process here in the United States, block grant means we're giving you the money directly, so we're cutting out 25% of it. And then next year we're going to cut even more because now it's not one of our programs, not our problem. They still have a strong youth program. They have not just youth centers that kids can go to. They have people whose job it is to go to the youth on the street and find out what's going on with their homeless youth and to try to plug these kids into services. Drug and alcohol rehabilitation, shelters, food sources, maybe even get them into education or a job training scheme. All of these systems, all these countries have a system of youth programs. That's why we have 6 times the number of kids in juvie. What is a youth program? It's voluntary participation, not the staff, the kids. It's youth-centered, youth-driven. The youth are given a voice in how the program is run. The youth are given a chance to take leadership positions in the program. It provides appropriate adult supervision from non-parents, non-teachers, a mentor who is not in a direct authority over the kid. We don't have those pre-rehearsed arguments. And we provide non-structured mentorship. We do have to find a balance, however, between what we're trying to do on any given day, and let's face it, when you're dealing with high-risk youth, there is the crisis of the moment. Because anyone who's worked with kids in crisis knows they're in crisis. And sometimes you got to drop what you're doing and pay attention to the immediate crisis before you get back to the bigger program. This is something we do good here do well here at Wenatchee Valley College. Students are here voluntarily. They have clubs, they have student organizations that they can be involved with. They choose their teachers, and they choose when to come to us with a crisis. So what are the costs of these programs? Well, if we're talking about one out on the street, you can run a youth program today in the United States for around $65,000 to $75,000. Now, that is based on what we did at Youth Services at Kidtask County, where we had a director who admittedly was receiving part of his payment in SSI because he was one of the last polio victims in the United States and was still in a wheelchair. And we paid him $1,000 a month and gave him a little bit to help with health insurance. Our biggest expense was liability insurance. The center was a union hall that was donated to us, and all the equipment we got was donated. These programs, instead of jailing one kid, they can reach 10, 20, 30 kids at a time. How would you like to get a 90% return on your investment? I know I would. We need overlapping systems. You don't just need one youth program, you need multiple youth programs because different kids have different needs. And we need to remember that this is not about short term. Remember, I'm not talking about ethics, I'm talking about costs. Incarceration is more expensive than treatment. Treatment is more expensive than prevention. I was speaking with Professor Reyes this morning, 2 days ago, and he told me that treatment for a drug and alcohol addicted person can cost between $3,000 and $12,000. How much was that? $88,000? Flushing sound. But we need to stop seeing these kids as liabilities and future but rather as future taxpayers. What does this create? Opportunities. Opportunities for the youth themselves, opportunities for students and new college graduates to get real hands-on experience. I had 2 years volunteering at Youth Services at Kidtask County. When I left that program, I was able to, whenever I went into a job interview, they would ask me, what experience do you have? And I told them, I've worked at this agency. What did you do there? I supervised up to 12 to 14 kids at a time, helped run a youth drop-in center, helped with fundraising, met with the board, wrote grant proposals. We need programs which are after school, weekend, and summer. Any time that these kids might need them. So to summarize, remember, I'm not an expert. I'm just a storyteller. I've worked with these kids. I've heard their stories. I tell what I think I've heard and gave them a chance to tell me that I'm wrong. 2, we all work with youth. Even you, students. Yeah, you. You don't know which of your classmates are high-risk youth. You don't know which of your classmates are in crisis right now. But you can listen. Every youth has value and can add to the community. Because we can't afford to throw one kid away. We're not throwing them away. We're spending $88,000 a year. That's not throwing away. All youth programs are a strong investment in our community's future. Again, 90% return on investment per year. And just remember, every outreach is an opportunity for youth to make a change. And I have seen you talk to a kid who was bawling. You don't know. You may have saved that kid from committing suicide that afternoon. And I've seen you do it time and time again. So this is usually the point in the presentation where the, quote, expert asks, do you have any questions? Well, first of all, let me quickly put up my slides of my sources. And then I want to ask a different question. What great lessons have your students taught you? How do we convince our students to work with us? And what student victories make us the most proud? So what do you guys, you have questions? You want to throw out something that you've learned that you think would be helpful to the audience? Now's the time. Don't worry, we've got microphones all around here. This room is bugged. Questions, comments, what's for the good of the order? Go.